Hello, BookTube. All right, we're going to continue with my 7.7K Q&A answers. Sorry I had to break this up into 2 days, but I'm hoping to finish out all the rest of the answers today, no matter how many videos it takes. So where did we leave off? We left off with Nicholas Lasitiotakis, and he asks, what do you think of the 3 short biographies written by Evelyn Waugh, or generally of his work other than Brideshead? I'm a big fan of everything that he wrote. I think all of it is really good. Also, last week you expressed your lack of interest in Kingsley Amos's later novels. Well, not really. I expressed a wonder what I would make of them. I considered them, I think like a lot of the critical consensus, considered them to be progressive failures, that each one was weaker than the one before it. But I'm always willing to revise that idea. But do you enjoy his critical output? I do, yes. I'm not sure, 100% sure who's responsible for all of that critical output, but I do enjoy it, yes. Stuart Durbin asks, how can one aspire to be as productive as you without resorting to amphetamines? Don't do that. Don't resort to amphetamines. Do you have a particular diet that gives you energy? Oh, God, no. My diet is terrible. No, it's a combination of things, some of which you might not be able to aspire to. I am physiologically a bit of a freak in some ways. For instance, I need comparatively little sleep, especially if I'm going. If I get going, if I'm not, if I'm sober and I'm on a roll, then I can ignore the need for sleep for quite some time, in a way that is not healthy for me, whereas it would be very unhealthy for most people. But other aspects of it are just a matter of focus. That's all. Trust me. I would hope that it's true that if you are told at some discrete point in your life by some bored professional who has other things to do that day, that it's very likely you don't have long to live, it will concentrate your mind wonderfully. It will sweep away the distractions that usually clutter up a life. And if you then get lots of extra time, even though you've been told that happens all the time, the medical profession really shouldn't tell people that. That clarity won't go away. So I would, the parts of the answer to your question that you can control, I would say, seize on your life. You don't get any other time than this time. So seize on it and act like it's, I know it's a cliche, but act like it's the last week of your life. It'll help you to concentrate on getting things done and not just lounging around. Unless you want to lounge around for the last week of your life, in which case that's fine. Jenny Parks says, any advice for someone with reading motivation issues? I have the attention span of a toddler lately. Okay, all right, let's... I'm sorry, I don't mean to be all Jesuitically hair-spilling right out of the gate here, but let's talk about the 2 parts of your question. Okay, because... you already have the reading motivation, right? Motivation is just a line on a contract. Motivation is your reason for doing something. You can have all the motivation in the world. You already know what your reading motivation is. You know that you love it. You know that it improves you. You know that it adds to you. You know that it thrills you and humbles you and gives you solace. You know all that. You have your reading motivation already. What we're talking about here is your willingness to act on that. Now, if you say you have lately the attention span of a toddler, I don't want to discount the discouraging effects of external forces. If you have heartache in your life, if you have depression in your life, if you have real world actual setbacks, lost a job, millions and millions of Americans, for instance, have lost a job in 2020. Or you're dealing with the reason for the loss of the job, which is COVID-19 or something like that. If that is underscoring the lately, well, I'm not discounting any of those things. And, obviously your ability to deal with those things should come first. But if it's not those things and we're just talking about you getting off your duff and doing what you want to do, then my advice would be the same as the last question. Remember that you're not going to have forever to do this. In about 5 minutes, you're going to be dead. So act accordingly. I'm not saying to write off or ignore serious problems that are demanding your attention and maybe drawing that attention away from reading. But let's draw a careful line, right? The only reason I'm sounding so skeptical of those serious problems is because in the 21st century, 95% of the people who tell me that they're having real motivation problems, dude, are just being self-indulgent. And they have absolutely no motivation problems when it comes to idly thumbing through their phone for 4 hours straight. Or playing video games for literally 10 hours of their day. 10 hours of their day playing video games and vaping next to the coffee table. If that's true, then there is no question here of a problem with motivation. Okay, there's a problem with the wrong motivation. But I don't mean to be yelling at you. We're all frenzies here. Let's move on. Zulu Blades asks, number one, is there a reasonable case to be made in defense of Shelbyfoot's more problematic positions, e.g. veneration of Nathan Bedford Forrest, I could fight for the Confederacy today, etc.? Yes, there is a reasonable case to be made in defense of his more problematic positions, which is that you're not reading him in order to date him or take him to the prom. He can have any opinions that he wants, even ones that disagree with blue checkmark progressives on Twitter. He can have any opinions that he wants. The only way that you have to have a problem dealing with that is if he writes those opinions in his books. If his books are about those opinions. In Shelbyfoot's case, that is absolutely not true. It's true, in his 3-volume history of the American Civil War, there's a great deal of admiration for some aspects of the Confederacy and many aspects of Confederate figures. Nathan Bedford Forrest is one of them. He's also extremely generous to Robert E. Lee, the worst traitor the country has ever produced. The books are still great. So there's no need to make a defense of his problematic statements. He's entitled to his opinions. Question number 2, do they affect your regard for him as a historian or thinker? No, absolutely not, nor should they, for anybody, affect that regard. You don't have to agree with somebody to read them. I know you are generally Team Catton. That's referring to Bruce Catton, the Civil War historian Bruce Catton, but Shelbyfoot's 3-volume American Civil War history is tremendously good. So, Team Catton. It's not like I'm trying to beat any other team. I prefer the Civil War writings of Bruce Catton, but Shelbyfoot's book is great. Let's see here. Clash2, TEW, says, do you think there will be an adaptation of The Lord of the Rings that will surpass the greatness of the Jackson films? Also, do you think there will be an adaptation of The Hobbit that will amend Jackson's failures? Okay, I love you people so much. I could answer questions like these literally all day long. All right. The first question, do I think there would be an adaptation of Lord of the Rings that would surpass the greatness of the Jackson films? I absolutely think such a thing is possible. I'm a huge fan of the Jackson films. I think they're great. But look at what they do. Look at the things they do that are beloved by the fans who watch the movies. They're beloved by me. But look at the things they do that either aren't in the books or that are in the books but very different. Like, for instance, using Gimli for comic effect. The friendship in the book, The Lord of the Rings, that emerges between Gimli and Legolas is far, far more complex than the friendship that develops between Legolas and Gimli in the movies, where Legolas essentially gets a really, really agreeable pet. And so on and so forth. If you go through the books, there's the Ring and Sauron are avatars, holdovers of an old magic, a very old magic. They are holdovers from another world. Lord of the Rings, one of the themes that runs throughout it is the dealing of the Hobbit world, the modern world, with holdovers from the ancient past. Remember, in the Council of Elrond, when Frodo hears that Elrond remembers the defeat of Sauron and the taking of the ring, he says, I thought these things happened long ages ago. And Elrond says, yes, they did, and I was there. That element is in Peter Jackson's movies, but it's a much stronger element in the book. And there are all sorts of ways that you could make that work in a different adaptation. In fact, it's observing that theme of the mysteries that old magic poses for the modern era. It's in observance of that theme that Tom Bombadil fits perfectly in the book, and is brought up at the Council of Elrond, where somebody says it sounds like he has power even over the One Ring, and Gandalf has to say no. Say more accurately, it has no power over him. He's his own master, older than the ring, older than Sarum. Another holdover of ancient magic, like the Ents, like the wizards themselves. In other words, there's a lot of subtlety and complexity that Jackson had to cut out of the Lord of the Rings itself. He did a great job, and all you have to do to underscore that realization is to go through the dialogue of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, and you will see that it is saturated with quotes and excerpts lovingly transposed from where they were to where Jackson wants them to be. That's wonderful. But imagine here, the very best computer animation for the very latest cutscenes of video games, and maybe the very latest computer animation Japanese anime. Imagine all of that, mix it together, and then imagine it 5 years later, 5 years better than that. No question of practical special effects versus green screen. No question of anything like that, where it's all done on the palette of pixels. And imagine at the same time that the end result did not have to put butts in seats in the movie theaters, and could go on as long as it wanted. Well, if you had that, and there's money to do that. There are Tolkien fans who would bankroll that. And we don't live in the age of movie theaters anymore. Such a thing could stream on a streaming service and be incredible. Be an absolutely incredible realization of Lord of the Rings. It wouldn't supplant Peter Jackson, which was his vision. But in terms of, did you ask better? Will surpass in greatness? It absolutely could. Such a thing absolutely could. I don't anticipate that that's what Amazon's Lord of the Rings series will be like. I think Amazon is the people involved in that, the people in the studio meetings, will very much have bad models in mind. Game of Thrones models in mind. Of discrete episodes, dramatic beat in the middle of each discrete episode, dramatic beat at the end of each episode, that sort of thing. I hope not. That's not how this story is actually structured, but we shall see. But Jackson's versions absolutely could be surpassed, I think. And 10 years ago when we started this question, we had another question. Do you think there will be an adaptation of The Hobbit that will amend Jackson's failures? That would be easy to do. In fact, in a perfect world, again, there's money. Again, there have been many people who've spoken up and asked for this. In a perfect world, Peter Jackson would make that version. He would make a 2-hour movie of The Hobbit. He wouldn't try to bring in anything else. He would do a 2-hour movie of The Hobbit with very different special. It would give him a chance to go back to the drawing board, do Smaug differently, do all sorts of other things differently, but a very different version, a 2-hour discrete movie. Think, for instance, of how unbelievably effective his King Kong movie was. Just a classic in every way. Not just the signature visuals of his Lord of the Rings, but also everything else. Just incredible. It shows what he can do. It shows that he can do it. I think he did 15 Hobbit movies, and they've been widely and rightly criticized as naked cash grabs at marketing opportunities. Well, if you went back to Peter Jackson and said, look, you only have one cinematic legacy, and right now you set yours almost back to zero with that travesty. We're giving you a chance to do it again. We will throw a bag of money at you. Make a 2-hour Hobbit movie. You can recast everything and make a 2-hour Hobbit movie. That would work, but other people could do it too. Let's see here. Leo Percara says, you put Our Man by George Packer on your best biographies list. Yes. Can you recommend a biography of a Republican diplomat? I just read one just recently, The Last Brahmin, about Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. had its flaws. I'm right now working on a review of it, but I'd recommend that. I'd certainly recommend getting to know, learning about Henry Cabot Lodge, even if you don't do it through that book. Let's see here. Morgana Dulac says, I hope I'm still in time for some questions. Well, you always will be, right? Because if we don't do these, there'll be another one coming up. I think in the time that I've waited to do these answers, we've gotten halfway to 7.8K, so it won't be long. But let's see here. In your opinion, why is Dune such a polarizing book? From my experience, people love it or hate it. Oh, no. No, 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 no. No, no, no. No. I beg to differ. I think it's extremely unlikely, actuarially speaking, that my experience of having people read Dune is significantly longer than yours. And I don't believe that it is a truly polarizing book. A truly polarizing book has people loving or hating it once they finish it. For me, the yardstick for Dune, the problem for Dune, is that people don't finish it. And if that's what you meant by polarizing, the problem is simply they need to buckle down, because Frank Herbert is working on a canvas and in a level of detail and complexity and adult literature that, let's face it, is a little rare in science fiction and fantasy. It's a little rare. He makes significant demands on the reader, and he doesn't really slow down to help the reader out. So it's been my experience that the famous banquet scene stops readers of Dune. They will get that far, they won't get any more done, and they will forever afterwards slag the book. If that's what falls into your experience as well, you shouldn't credit them as people who read the book. I know almost nobody who's actually got to the end of the book that didn't love it. For me, the people who are negative on Dune always are the ones who haven't finished it, for whatever reason. I think my idea of the reason is that it put too much demand on them, and so they stopped. Let's see here. You keep telling, this is still Morgana Dulac, you keep telling that there is a difference between younger boys and girls when it comes to reading. What do you think that is? Cultural encouragement, only. Cultural encouragement, that's all. For young boys. Teenage boys are more of my specialty, and teenage boys is a different thing, because after around the age of 11, 12, 13, young boys start to have a steroid concoction popped into their bloodstream 24 hours a day, day in and day out, for the rest of their natural lives. a steroid called I almost said estrogen. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. I want to say adrenaline, but it's not that. Everybody has access to adrenaline. Testosterone. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why I blanked. Especially since I am a living embodiment of testosterone. But anyway, boys, once they start biochemically changing into men, start having testosterone pumped into their bloodstream 24 hours a day. And it makes them chest bump at bars, and it makes them fight over golf scores, and it makes them start wars on the Asian continent. It makes them do all sorts of things that it doesn't make women do. But before that, little boys and little girls are encouraged to read, and little boys aren't. I know even now in the 21st century, I know some parents who are very young. They're young enough to be my grandchildren, where their reflexive reaction to seeing a boy sitting on a couch reading is, shouldn't you be out running around? And they would never say that to a girl. It would never cross their mind to do that. They see a little girl sitting on a couch reading and think, oh, she's going to be a really smart one. How wonderful. That's a cultural thing. And thankfully, it's a lot less prevalent than it used to be. Because I also know plenty of young parents who, if they saw a little boy reading, would do nothing but encourage him. So it's a cultural thing until it's a medical thing. And do you think people are reading more, or may it look that way because the bookworms are now more connected? That's a very good point. I myself think that the statistics clearly show that fewer people are reading, and that people are reading less. But I admit that there are studies that say otherwise, and also, either way, there's the illusion of more people reading because we have more access to other readers now in 2020 than anyone has ever had in the history of the world. readers congregate by the millions in places where they detail their reading. We have BookTube, where we get to talk to each other about our reading. That never happened before. It used to be once upon a time, you were in Ankeny, Iowa, and new to town, you had no idea who in town read and what they read. Now it would be easy to find out. You could practically do a head count. So that's definitely an element. Gunnar says, what do you think about C.W. Saram's archaeology books? Well, I'm not the one to ask, am I? You'd want to ask Mark at Richardson Reads. I've read only a couple of them, and I enjoyed them, but I don't know. Mark and Sean D. Standfast have archaeological experience, so I have no idea how to rank the books or stack them up against that. Or no, I'm assuming that everything in them is outdated. I like the guy's style, his prose style, if that counts for anything. But you'd really want to ask Mark Richardson. Sooner or later, he'll do a Q&A on his channel, and then you can ask him. Julie Alvar, how are we doing for time? Okay. What is meant by a starred review? Beats me. I don't like them, and I don't like people who use them. It beats me what a star... I don't know what a star review means, because you scratch a single person of the millions of people who use Goodreads, for instance, and they'll talk for an hour about what precisely the star rating of a particular book meant to them, which is why this reading system should never be used. I have no idea. When I look at Goodreads, or I look at Amazon or whatever, or eBay for rating things, I will always look to the guide for what the different stars mean. But it's so fungible. It doesn't mean anything to me. And do you consider yourself an introvert? I'm assuming, Julie, that you are new to the channel. No, I am not an introvert. Not at all. I was raised and socialized by the most extrovert species on the planet. The single most extrovert species on the planet. I don't really know what it means to be an introvert, but I do know what they're like, because over the course of my life, I have adopted many an introvert and treated them almost as if they were human. Marcus wants to know, any chance of doing Sherlocktober 2? Oh my, we did a Sherlocktober. The Wrath of Dr. Watson. That would be the subtitle, The Wrath of Dr. Watson. I think we still have the casebook, The Valley of Fear, and His Last Bow to go through. I love the idea. I'm just worried. Think about this last weekend. I disappeared off the radar. And the whole of the week, I've been clawing my way back. Monday and Tuesday, making videos was incredibly difficult, incredibly draining. You think about that, from my perspective, I'm looking at that and thinking, well, I don't want to set up an event and then let you down, right? That's salt in the wound to somebody from my generation. I did not appear in the live stream, in the discussion, the Zoom chat, for the final episode of ShakeTube 2020, an event I was helping to host, and I didn't appear. Couldn't appear. That really burns. So I'm hesitant to start events. I'm hesitant to make them. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. How are we doing for time? Let's see. Parampool Kindle says, did you visit Yugoslavia while it existed? Yes, I did. Who do you think is the best writer from that region? Well, I don't profess to be an expert in the writers of that region, but I love Hrabal. Absolutely love him. I've never read anything by him that I didn't love. So maybe he would count. James Holder, congrats on 700. Thank you. My questions. What do you think of Picard Season 1? Oh, how much time do you have? I watched it. I finished watching it just recently up at the farm, up at the new, at Old Stonebuck up in Vermont with Mark Richardson. And I have a lot of thoughts on the series. Lots of them. There were moments that I cheered out loud, sitting there on the couch. That I never do that. There were moments when I was enraptured. There were moments when I was horrified. The fate of Icheb is horrifying that we see revealed in this show. I thought it actually, I'll have to do a whole video devoted to this, or maybe tempt Mark into a conversation about it back and forth, because I was talking to him about it, and he doesn't really understand my fascination with alt-right YouTubers. He doesn't really understand my fascination with, there's a whole commentariat on YouTube of men, neck-bearded men, who make just a huge grifting amount of money weaponizing good old days, bring back the 90s outrage about anything to do with updating characters, making characters more sensitive, any kind of parody or activism for women of any kind. Anything like that drives them insane. They'll milk it for 10, 20 videos, each one of which has 10 ad breaks. And they went nuts hating Picard Season 1. Before I'd seen it, I had seen a ton of videos from these guys hating this show, saying that it eviscerates, that it emasculates Jean-Luc Picard, who of course was the captain of their 90s childhood. I didn't have any of that baggage myself because I came to Star Trek Picard having hated that captain from the 90s. But I nevertheless watched this show, in addition to paying attention to how well done it is. It is incredibly well done, incredibly well scripted, and incredibly well acted right across the board. There were a couple of weak spots, a couple of very, very strong spots. The actress who plays Alice Girardi, who was a newsroom figure in The Newsroom with Jeff Daniels, is outstandingly good. There were many acting performances that were very, very good. I think they were all overshadowed by the incredible autumnal performance that Patrick Stewart gives as Jean-Luc Picard, a much older, a 90-something Jean-Luc Picard. I think they were all overshadowed by that. The more I think about it, the more amazed I am in that acting performance. And there were also great callbacks to great Star Trek, often signaled by that whatever Star Trek's theme song. I have a lot to say on the subject. I thought it was fascinating. A fascinating examination of consequences in the Star Trek world, but not in Starfleet. If you think about it, we don't usually see that. Never before Picard have we seen a Star Trek that wasn't Starfleet. This is Star Trek that isn't Starfleet, and it's Star Trek in which all of the characters, not just Picard, not just this weird emasculation fetish that these YouTube bros have, not just him, but all the characters are working through horrible demons, horrible wounds and scars of their past. All of them are. And by the end of Season 1, those wounds have been healed. They have been addressed and fixed, and in intelligent ways. I very much liked it. Anyway, James has another question, so we don't go on forever and ever. What would you do with the Legion of Superheroes if you had the opportunity? Well, technically speaking, I do have the opportunity, right? As long as fanfiction.net exists. Fanfiction.net, for those of you who don't know, is a huge website that collects fan fiction of owned properties. So stuff that you couldn't, for copyright reasons, ever write for publication, except it's the internet, and the internet is wonderful. So fanfiction.net has 80,000 different stories set in the continuities and altering the continuities of 80 million kinds of products, including a whole thread on the Legion of Superheroes. If I wanted to, I could write an epic story about the Legion for fanfiction.net, right? And I have such a story in mind. Oh my, I would reimagine the Legion to be a little more creative in their membership. Like, for instance, why would Superboy be the only hero they go back in time to recruit? What if they recruited somebody from the 25th century? And what if that somebody was very different? And also, if you were the Legion of Superheroes and you were an intergalactic or galactic peacekeeping force sent to all kinds of trouble spots with all kinds of high-powered enemies, I think you would make a point of one of the Legion bylaws is that you can't duplicate the powers of any other Legion member. That is observed in the Breach quite a bit. Lightning Lad and Lightning Lass have been members of the team at the same time many, many times. And technically speaking, Triplicate Girl triplicates the powers of other Legion members because she can turn into 3 Legion. And also, the Legion makes an exception in the case of Superboy and Supergirl, who are both Legion members even though they have identical powers. I think if in a sensible realization of the Legion of Superheroes, they would make an exception for what you would call Class 100 characters, because they would need them. Characters who have Kryptonian level superpowers. If you have a teenager from X, Y, or Z region or planet or personal circumstance comes forward and says, I want to join the Legion, I have Superboy's powers. you wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we already have Superboy. we have Mon-El as well, so we don't need anybody else who can stop a starship single-handed in open space." No, they would say yes to those people, and there would just be a cadre of them. Anyway, if by what you mean by this is what would I do if it was in the Legion in current continuity, if I weren't just writing it from scratch, I would do quite a bit. I could do quite a bit. In my opinion, the Legion should be teenagers. They should still be young. They shouldn't know it all. The New 52 Legion, for instance, was really, really good. I think it lasted for 20 issues, something like that. It was really, really good, really well drawn, really well written. But if you look at those issues back from 2012, they're not kids. They're just a superhero team. Almost no mention is made of their age. They're just a superhero team in the future. And that's okay, but I prefer it when they're kids, when they're teenagers, when part of the thing is that they're teenagers. I would have a blast. I'm sure I would, but I'll never get that chance. Let's stop here. Oh my, let's stop here and hope for maybe less digressions next time. I'll be right back.